Derrius Guice is a very interesting case. He was one of my favorite college football running backs of all time, but his off-the-field issues have made him look like a bad person, and it's tough to have a lot of respect for him after hearing some certain things about him. Today we'll be talking about Derrius Guice. We'll tell his whole football story, his time with LSU, his short career in the NFL, and all the off-the-field issues that ultimately ended his professional football career. But first, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new, give the video a like if you want to help the channel out, suggest what player I should take a look at next, and stay until the end. And now let's get started and talk about what happened to Derrius Guice. Derrius Guice grew up in the heart of Bayou territory as he was born and raised in Baton Rouge. From a very young age, he was an athlete and loved football. Life wasn't exactly easy for Derrius growing up though. He grew up in an area referred to as the Bottom, which was a bad neighborhood that was very poor and had a lot of crime. Things did not get much easier for him as when he was a boy, his father was actually murdered at the local Denny's restaurant and he saw it on the news. From then on, he channeled his energy into football and ran with a style he liked to call running angry. He always told his dad he wanted to play for LSU someday, and he was determined to fulfill that promise he had made. He said he felt scared, angry, and worried for his life when he was at home, so the football field kind of became a place of refuge for him. When it was time for high school ball, his mother didn't want him going to McKinley High School, as she did not want him to be a part of that culture there. Derrius and his three friends were all good at football, and would get a scholarship to go to a predominantly white school in an area known as Catholic High. For the first time in his life, Guice and his three friends were bullied terribly and experienced a degree of racism. Apparently all three of them, especially Derrius, came home almost every single night crying, and they struggled mightily. It got so bad actually that he wanted to transfer back to his old high school, but his mother would tell him something that would change his life. She asked how many kids from his neighborhood got the opportunity to go to a good school on scholarship. From that moment, Derrius realized he was blessed with an opportunity to bring him and his mother out of poverty, so he took it and literally ran with it. As a junior, he got really close with a white guidance counselor named Stephanie, who also grew up in a lot of poverty. She helped him after a gang-related fight left him unconscious one day, and she basically took Derrius in. The school told her she needed to spend less time with him or she would lose her job, and she ended up picking helping him over her job. When Derrius stepped on the field, he played for his murdered father, his hardworking mother, his friends, and the counselor that helped him, and he definitely was not going to let them down. He had become an absolute beast on the football field as he blossomed into one of the best running back recruits in the country. He became a 5-star recruit and was ranked as the second best back behind Damian Harris. After a senior year in which he ran for 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns, he was named to the All-Metro team and got an invite to the Army All-American game. Guice went off in the Army All-American game and was actually so good that he was named the MVP of the game. Clearly he was a star, but where was he going to go to school? Well, just like he had promised his dad, LSU was going to be in the mix. He ended up committing to the Tigers over the likes of Texas, Tulane, and Alabama, and he was also a track star. His recruiting did dip a little bit, as at the end, according to 24/7 Sports, he was only a 4-star recruit, the number 2 back, and the 45th best player in the class of 2015. Derrius had made it, and his journey wasn't exactly perfect, but he was now going to be playing football for one of the nation's premier programs and one of the best schools in the country at developing running backs. Going into the 2015 season, LSU was going into their 11th season under head coach Les Miles, and the Tigers were projected to compete in the SEC West. Brandon Harris was the quarterback, former 5-star recruit Leonard Fournette was the running back, and Malachi Dupree and Trayvon Durrell were the wideouts. Guice was the third running back on the team with Darrell Williams in front of him, but he was definitely going to play. They were supposed to open up the season with McNeese State, but the game kept going into a weather delay, and it was ultimately canceled, and LSU would only play in 11 games. Their next matchup was against number 25 Mississippi State, and they won that game in a thriller. From then, Guice did not appear in a game until they played number 18 Auburn. Against the Tigers, Guice ran the ball 6 times for 55 yards, which wasn't a bad start. He played sparingly against Eastern Michigan and Syracuse, and finally scored his first career touchdown against South Carolina. In that game, he also ran for 161 yards, and he showed his potential. After wins over number 8 Florida and a good Western Kentucky team, the Tigers were 7-0 and ranked number 5 in the country. College game day came to Tuscaloosa for the Tide showdown with the Tigers, and Alabama would win 30-16. Guice didn't appear in the game, and the inability to beat Alabama is what would ultimately cost Les Miles his job. After the Bama loss, they dropped the game to Arkansas at home, and then on the road to number 25 Ole Miss. The season had quickly fallen apart, and they finished the year with a win against Texas A&M. They would get a bid to play in the Texas Bowl, where they easily beat Texas Tech. As a true freshman, Guice ran the ball 51 times for 436 yards and 3 touchdowns, and that was really solid for him, and he had shown some of the potential he had. Going into 2016, the Tigers were super hyped up as they began the year ranked number 5 in the country. They had both quarterbacks Brandon Harris and Purdue transfer Danny Etling, and Danny would end up winning the job, and Harris would later transfer to North Carolina. They opened up the season at Lambeau Field against Wisconsin, and they lost that game in an absolute thriller. In that game, Guice ran for 3 yards, and the scene under Les Miles had begun to heat up tremendously. They would beat Jacksonville State, where he'd go for 155 yards, and then Mississippi State before a road matchup with Auburn. The Tigers would end up losing that game, and Les Miles was fired right after. Ed Orgeron was named the interim head coach, and their next matchup was against Missouri. I remember this game quite clearly as Guice went off for 163 yards and 3 touchdowns against my team, and that's when I became a fan of Guice and his talent. He'd go on to go for 162 more yards against Southern Miss the following week, and then they beat number 23 Ole Miss before a showdown with number 1 Alabama. In Coach O's first crack at the Tide, they lost 10-0. Derrius would erupt for 252 yards and 2 touchdowns against number 25 Arkansas, and he had become a young star. He then ran for 83 yards in their loss to Florida, where he was stopped at the goal line on the final play. He finished the year with 285 yards and 4 touchdowns against Texas A&M, and not only had Guice become a young college football superstar, but he broke the school record for rushing yards in a game. The Tigers got a bid to play Louisville in the Citrus Bowl, and he ran for 138 yards and a score in that one. As a sophomore, Guice broke out as he ran for 1,387 yards and 15 touchdowns, and he was named to the All-SEC first team as a backup to Leonard Fournette. That was pretty crazy. With Fournette now in the NFL, it was going to be Guice's team, and he was expected to potentially become the best running back in the country. They decided to keep Coach O around, and Danny Etling was back for his senior year. Guice went on for 122 yards and a score in their Week 1 win over BYU, and then 102 yards and 2 touchdowns in a game over Chattanooga. Unfortunately, he would suffer a leg injury, and that would limit him for the next few games. He bounced back against Florida with 50 yards, and then helped them beat the number 17 Gators. 2 weeks later, he went off against Ole Miss with 276 yards and a score, and he became the first player in SEC history to rush for over 250 yards in 3 career games. They lost to Alabama once again, and then Guice went for 147 yards and 3 scores against Arkansas. They beat Tennessee, and then he finished the regular season with a good win over Texas A&M, and they would finish with a 9-3 regular season record. They were matched up with Notre Dame in the Citrus Bowl, and they lost a really close game despite almost 100 yards from Derrius. After rushing for 1,251 yards and 11 touchdowns, he was named to the SEC's All-Second team despite struggling with an injury, and he not only escaped poverty, but he was now on fast track to becoming an NFL star, and he would leave after his junior year and become one of the top running back prospects in the 2017 NFL draft class. He was supposed to be a first-round pick, but apparently character issues were raised, and it was rumored he got into a verbal altercation with an executive from the Eagles. Because of that, he fell to the second round, where he was taken by the Washington Redskins with the 59th overall pick. Guice joined a crowded running back room that included Samaje Perine, Adrian Peterson, and Chris Thompson, but he would never get a chance to compete as he would tear his ACL in his first preseason game and was put on IR. He rebounded and rehabbed going into 2019 and was pegged as a guy who could break out. Sadly, in his debut, he tore his meniscus and would miss a lot of time. He returned in November, where he went for 129 yards and 2 scores, then he got dealt another bad hand as he injured his MCL and was done for the remainder of the season. After 2 years, Guice had spent almost all of his time on the bench with injuries, and time was starting to run out. He was supposed to get one more chance in 2020, but that went out the window after news surfaced earlier this fall. Character had always been an issue from Derrius because of what happened to him as a kid, and I think the anger got the best of him. He has gotten in trouble for 3 domestic violence situations and was charged with 3 counts of assault, a charge of battery, and a destruction of property. There's also rumors that went around that he had raped and sexually assaulted a girl at LSU, and things just are not looking good for him. Guice would end up turning himself in and will now await his fate legally. The Redskins wasted no time in releasing him from the team, and it now looks like his football career is done. Without even waiting to hear what happened, the Redskins released him immediately and assumed the worst. Guice did claim he did nothing wrong, but the courts will prove it in the end. I do believe that Derrius made a lot of mistakes in his career, and sadly this what ended up harming his football career. I do hope the best for Guice, and I really hope he gets his life figured out, and everyone deserves second and even third chances, and the ability to learn and grow from their mistakes. He was definitely a talented player, and injuries did hold him back in his first 2 years in the league, but the more important thing is that he gets his life together and becomes the person we all know he could become. He was one of my favorite college football players of all time, and sadly his off-the-field stuff has made me lose a lot of respect for him, but let's hope he gets back to the top. I really hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and please be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed, and let me know your thoughts on if he will ever play again, and another player I should do next. If you're still here, check out all my other videos on the end screen, and subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys again soon. But until next time, peace.